You know that feeling when you're trying to focus at work, but the lights are too bright and the office is just too loud and someone dropped a complex task on you mid-thought? You're really dysregulated, but everyone else just seems fine? Well, this video is for you. Imagine a janitor asking for a mop and the boss says, "Why can't you just use your hands?" Ridiculous, right? But that's basically what happens when autistic people ask for accommodations. So today, let's fix that. Here are 5 accommodations that your brain actually needs and exactly how to ask for them without torching your career. Hey friends, I'm Mike, a late identified autistic adult. I'm a former Microsoft software developer and NHS tech lead, and today we're going to talk about workplace accommodations. Accommodations is such a strange word because it implies that there is a special treatment available, you know? A secret menu maybe, or that you're accommodating/tolerating someone else's poor behaviour. Accommodations are not special treatment, they are more like work equipment. They remove friction so that you can spend your energy on doing the job that you're paid to do. In the UK, accommodations are called reasonable adjustments, and they are legally required under the Equality Act 2010. Americans and everyone else will get to you guys later in the video, but whether you call them accommodations or adjustments, the principle is the same. They are tools or changes that allow you to do your job effectively. Do stay tuned to the end because I'll show you exactly how to ask for these without sounding, difficult, and why getting this right could mean the difference between thriving or burning out before even your probation ends. If you're allistic or non-autistic or neurotypical and you're listening to me and you're like, what is he going on about? Well, the reason this stuff matters is because only around 3 in 10 autistic people are in any kind of employment, according to UK government statistics from 2024, and that's actually one of the lowest rates of any disability group. For all disabilities, all aggregated together, the employment rate is 55% compared to 34% for autistic people. Even autistic graduates are twice as likely to be unemployed as their non-disabled peers. For a neurotypical brain, background noise is just that. It's background. Their brain filters it out automatically, or so I've learned. But for so many autistic people, like me, we lack what's called neural gating. Every phone ringing, every conversation from 3 desks over, every flickering fluorescent light, it all gets processed at the same priority as the work on your screen. And it's not that we're just easily distracted, although many of us have ADHD too, it's just that our brains are treating everything as equally important. I talked about this in my video on autism and school, which covered Pete Warmby's book Untypical. In that book, he puts it perfectly. He says, I suppose neurotypical people have some kind of built-in filter that allows them to tune out the sound in their vicinity, but I'm afraid that I don't have this feature. And if you struggled with this at school, the open plan classrooms, the corridors, the canteen, congratulations, you have now graduated to the open plan office. It's the same problem, just a different decade. And it's not just sound, of course. It's the colleague who wears too much perfume, the harsh overhead lighting, the visual chaos of an open plan layout with no partitions, all of it, it just adds up. By lunchtime, your battery is already drained, not from work, but from the environment. And if you've seen my video on autism and IQ, you'll remember this. Imagine trying to solve complex problems while sitting under a flickering fluorescent light with a fire alarm going off. That's what open plan offices feel like for so very many of us every single day. That's the problem. What about the fix? Well, it's an external filter. Outside of our bodies, it's an external filter. The National Autistic Society suggests noise-cancelling headphones or noise-blocking earbuds. I did a review of the loops versus the flares. Pretty good, check them out. Sunglasses or tinted lenses are really good. Even sensory tools like fidget toys. The UK government guidance on reasonable adjustments actually explicitly mentions making physical changes to the workplace. So what that means is not just rearranging everything for everyone, but moving your desk away from high traffic areas, maybe printers or lunchrooms. It could mean including visual partitions. It could mean access to a quiet room when you really need deep focus. I made a whole video comparing loops and flare earplugs. The short version of that video is that loop earplugs are discreet, they look like small little earrings, and you can choose how much sound reduction you want with the different models or the loop switches. Some models will let you select between 8 and 14 decibels of reduction, which is the difference between taking the edge off or turning a coffee shop into maybe a library. They are more socially acceptable than wearing over-the-head headphones. That will only really apply in some workplaces, but they are a legitimate accommodation. Another thing people often forget is clothing. The National Autistic Society table of reasonable adjustments explicitly lists being allowed to wear comfortable clothing that's different from the usual dress code. If the standard uniform has scratchy seams, tight collars, or synthetic fabrics that make your skin crawl, that's a sensory issue and it's a valid accommodation to request alternatives. You shouldn't have to spend 8 hours feeling like you're wrapped up in sandpaper. For each accommodation, I'm going to give an example of how to request that accommodation. I know I'm speaking very generally here. Let me know if you want more specific videos on certain employment niches in the future, but for now, how to ask. Well, you could say, I do my best work when I can reduce background distractions. Would it be okay if I wore noise-cancelling headphones during focus time? And if possible, could my desk be positioned away from high traffic areas? So you've got your headphones, you sit down, ready to work, but where are you sitting today? Hot desking. Every morning becomes some sort of mini adventure where you have to find a spot, adjust the chair height, hunt for the right cables if you didn't bring them, figure out who's sitting next to you and whether or not they're a loud typer or a phone call at a desk kind of person. All of that cognitive load, it's using up the RAM, if you will, that you need for actual work. It's like having lots of extra tabs open. So the fix is very simple. A consistent workstation, same desk, same setup, same neighbours, everything in its place so that you can cook. The National Autistic Society also recommends a few other predictability tools, daily check-ins with your manager to discuss objectives for the day, an agreed notice period before any changes to your schedule or workload. That last one, by the way, is huge and really difficult to get. But if your calendar can change without warning, you're constantly finding yourself bracing for impact. What's going to happen next? If you and your manager agree that you'll get, say, 24 hours notice before any meeting changes or new deadlines, then suddenly you're not bracing for impact every time you check your calendar. And if you're starting a new role, a phased start, beginning on reduced hours and ramping up gradually, can be the difference between absorbing the new routines or just drowning in them. How to ask? You could say, I find I work most effectively when I don't have to spend time setting up each day. Would it be possible to have a fixed desk so that I can hit the ground running? And could we agree on a notice period for any schedule changes? Even 24 hours would really help me plan. So you're at your desk, headphones on, ready to focus, and then it happens. I call this the drive-by. Your line manager appears from nowhere and verbally unloads a complex multi-part task on you while you're mid-thought, and your brain freezes. You just nod along politely, but inside, your auditory processing buffer is overflowing. Half of what they've told you, it's just already gone. This isn't about not listening, it's about how your brain processes information. Many autistic people need time to convert spoken words into meaning. And when somebody dumps out a wall of speech on you, the buffer overflows and data gets lost. It's not like a YouTube video where you can pause and rewind and replay or whatever, okay? Or change the speed as well. Imagine if you could do that in real life, just change the speed of people. That'd be amazing. This is one of the biggest things for me that really made me feel like a 4-decade-old alien. How do allistic or non-autistic people handle these sorts of constant breaks to their focus? Interestingly, they don't really. Research by Gloria Mark at UC Irvine found that it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds for a neurotypical person to return to a task after an interruption. But for autistic people with monotropic attention, where our focus works more like a narrow, intense beam than a wide floodlight, it can take so much longer. Sometimes you don't get back to it at all. I've described it to people in my life as having a whole house of cards collapsing and then rebuilding it. It's exhausting if it happens at all. I tend to do most of my work when everyone else, including most of the pets, they're asleep. This video was probably made at 3 a.m. Just so you know. A 2021 study by Howard and Sedgewick found that autistic people overwhelmingly prefer written communication, emails, texts, messages, because it allows more control and time to process information. It reduces anxiety and stress. So when you ask for written instructions, you're not being difficult, it's very much evidence supported. The tool here is simple, written instructions. Follow up verbal requests with an email. Agendas before any meetings. Asynchronous communication wherever possible. Think of it as giving your brain an external hard drive, something it can buffer with. And if you're in meetings where you get put on the spot and you're asked for immediate comment without any warning, put on the spot as you will, that's another one to fix. The NAS explicitly recommends that questions be circulated in advance so that you have time to prepare. And if a question does come up unexpectedly in a meeting, you should be able to answer at the end or respond in writing afterwards. Can we just table this for the next meeting? I need to do some research, do a bit of thinking, and get back to you. Not having enough time to process questions and frame a response can result in shutting down entirely, which gives the impression that you can't or that you won't contribute, when actually you just needed a few more seconds. How to be proactive then? How to ask. You say something like, I want to make sure that I get this exactly right. Would you mind sending me a quick email or message with the key points so that I have something to refer back to? As for the meetings, could we circulate any questions in advance, please? I can contribute much better when I've had time to prepare. Let's talk about the thing that exhausts autistic people faster than anything else, I think. Performance. You've probably heard of Zoom fatigue or something similar. Everyone felt it during the pandemic. For autistic people, it's not just fatigue, it's masking, additional masking, hard mode masking. You're trying to maintain eye contact with a camera lens, you're monitoring your own facial expressions in that little preview box. I've got a little one over there, I've got a bigger one over there. And you're nodding at the right moments, all while actually trying to listen to what's being said. That's not multitasking, that's draining your battery rapidly in real time. So, the accommodation, permission to go audio only or text chat only in non-essential, maybe even essential meetings. You're not checking out, you're actually increasing your auditory focus by removing the need for a visual performance. Actually, it was during the pandemic and its endless Zoom and Teams calls that I started to work on a permanent space and the camera and lighting setup for my calls. And it meant that I could have consistent video calls without needing to worry so much about the background or my appearance or whether I was in focus. And this eventually led to my weekly Tuesday live streams, so you can thank COVID for that. But video calls aren't the only battery drain. The NAS table lists several other adjustments that fall under flexibility, and honestly, these were game changers for me when I was still doing office-based work. Flexible working hours, for instance, starting earlier or later to avoid the sensory nightmare of rush hour commutes. If you arrive at work already overwhelmed from being crushed on the tube, you're not going to be productive for the first hour anyway. Then there's working from home. If the workplace itself is overwhelming due to social interaction and masking, remote work removes all of that problem at its source. And this is probably the single biggest accommodation that changed my working life. Staggered lunch breaks are another one. I made a whole video about autism in school, and lunch was a recurring theme. I used to try to find a quiet corner somewhere, hiding from the ever-watchful teachers on lunch break duty. Do you have that elsewhere in the world too? British teachers are kind of like mall cops with a prison guard aura and little handheld radios during break time periods. They're patrolling. My school had over 2,000 students, and it was almost impossible to find anywhere peaceful. For the first few years of high school, there was no access to the library during break times, so the only place that I could go for a break and be guaranteed a bit of peace was the toilets. And I really shouldn't have to tell you that you don't want to eat sandwiches in the toilets. And Pete Warmby says it perfectly in Untypical. He says, "It's safe to assume that a large number of autistic children will struggle to use the lunch hour for its main purpose of eating, having been defeated by the crowds around the food queue, and will probably enter the afternoon's lessons hungry and distracted." Sound familiar? Now replace afternoon lessons with afternoon meetings and you've got the adult version. A staggered lunch eating at 2 p.m. instead of noon or 11:30 before the rush hour, it means you actually get to eat something. And frequent breaks too, maybe if that's for you. If working for long stretches is exhausting, short regular breaks to reset can help you productive, rather than pushing you through until you crash. You could say something like, I find I can focus much better on what's being discussed when I'm not managing the camera. Is it okay if I join audio only for our regular check-ins? And could we discuss flexible hours or remote work options? I'm much more productive when I can manage my immediate environment. This one's invisible, but it might be the most important. Every workplace you see runs on unwritten rules. When your manager says, get this to me soon, does that mean today, this week, before the next meeting? When a colleague says we should grab coffee sometime, is that a real invitation or just noise? When feedback is Fine. Is it actually fine, or is that code for I'm disappointed? But I'm not going to say so out loud, but you need to hear it. You know what I mean? It's all weird. Neurotypical people seem to absorb this stuff through some sort of social osmosis. They seem like they understand it all when they're just toddlers, right? And it seems that everyone else got some sort of decoder tool, and I'm still waiting for mine to arrive in the post. And the problem isn't that the royal we just can't follow rules. That's not the issue. It's that we can't follow rules that we don't know exist. And the anxiety of constantly guessing whether you've got it right, it is exhausting. It's like being in some sort of abusive relationship. You end up second guessing everything. Did I reply too quickly, too slowly? Was that email too formal? Not formal enough. Should I have laughed at that joke? The accommodation here is very simple. Make expectations explicit, clear deadlines, written success criteria. Direct feedback, not hints, not euphemisms, actual words and what they mean. Okay? If ASAP means by the end of the day, then say by the end of the day. If dress code is smart casual, but everyone wore jeans on Fridays, then tell me that. My first job out of uni, I wore a suit, okay? Because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And after about 2-3 weeks, I ended up getting pulled into the director's office and told not to wear it, go home and get changed. Because, that's not how we dress here. I needed to go and buy myself some chinos, and a shirt, but not a smart shirt. Some are a bit less smart than a smart shirt, but how do you win? How do you win? In fact, this isn't about being difficult or pedantic. I didn't do any of that on purpose. That wasn't like Mike working his first sort of junior developer role out of university and he was trying to break it and make it not work, right? It's all about removing the guesswork so that you can spend your energy on the actual job. And I feel like if you are actually recruiting for software engineers, it would be completely fine to just be explicit and tell them exactly how they're expected to dress or whatever. That'd be fine, actually. I agree. I don't think anyone's going to take offense to that. And make it more general. How do you ask? How do you sort this out? In advance, you say, I want to make sure that I'm meeting expectations. Could we set clear deadlines for tasks, even rough ones? I would really appreciate direct feedback. If something isn't working, could you please just tell me straight? I'd rather know than guess. Okay, so you got the list. You now know what you need, but now comes the scary part, which is actually asking. And here's where people get stuck. They think, but I don't have an official diagnosis. Or maybe you think, oh, I'm just an IT contractor, or I'm just a freelancer, or what if they use this against me? Let me clear a few things up, starting with the UK, then the US. United Kingdom. In the UK, you do not need a formal diagnosis to be protected under the Equality Act 2010. If you have a condition that has a substantial, long-term effect on your ability to carry out day-to-day activities, and autism absolutely qualifies, you're entitled to reasonable adjustments, full stop. This applies to employees, part-timers, contractors, and freelancers. Your employer only has a legal duty to provide adjustments if they know that you need them. So yes, there is a disclosure element. But here's the reframe. You are not asking for special treatment, you're requesting the tools that you need to do the job that they hired you to do. If your needs go beyond what's reasonable for an employer to provide, well, that's where something called Access to Work comes in. It's a government scheme that can fund things like job coaching, communication support, specialist equipment, and even travel costs. It's free to apply and doesn't cost your employer anything. Let me know if you would like a video on Access to Work in the comments below. United States. If you are in the US, your protections come from the Americans with Disabilities Act, specifically Title I, which covers employment. Employers with 15 or more employees are required to provide reasonable accommodations unless it causes undue hardship to the business. Autism is absolutely covered under the ADA. The definition of disability is broad: any physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And that includes things like concentrating, communicating, interacting with others, and thinking, so yes, you qualify. The process is similar to the UK. You request an accommodation and your employer has to engage in an interactive process, they call it, to find a solution. They don't have to give you exactly what you ask for, but they do have to take your request seriously and work with you. One resource I'd highly recommend is the Job Accommodation Network, or JAN. It's a free service funded by the US Department of Labour that provides expert guidance on workplace accommodations. You can call them, chat with them, or browse their database of accommodation ideas by disability. And if you're not sure how to phrase your request, or you want to know what's worked for other autistic employees, Jan is the place to start. Link in the description below. Here's the thing no one tells you. You don't owe anyone your diagnosis. In both the UK and the US, you can request accommodations based on a functional need without ever using the word autism. Did you notice in all of my examples I gave you earlier, I never said, I'm autistic, I need this, okay? Because sometimes, it's not technically wrong, but psychologically, leading with that label can make things worse. And I've made a whole video on what I call the Autism Disclosure dilemma, explaining why. The short version, when you say, I'm autistic, you're activating whatever stereotype lives in that person's head. And that can shape how they see you and all of your work from that moment on. So instead of leading with the label, lead with the need. Don't say, I'm autistic and I need written instructions. Do say, I work best when I have things in writing. Can we make that happen? You're not hiding anything. You're framing it around outcomes, which is what your employer actually cares about. You're making it about them, not about you, if that makes sense. Disclosure can still be the right choice in supportive environments. And maybe if your employer is combative with some third-party assistance and guidance, you might then say, hey, look, the reason I'm asking these things is because I'm autistic, blah, 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 blah. What that means for you is this, blah, blah, blah. Ideally, it never gets to that point, but disclosure should be your choice. Something that you make intentionally and strategically, not something that you feel pressured into telling people. If any of this resonated with you, especially the sensory stuff, I made a whole video about why autistic people often struggle in school. That is linked below. Definitely give that a watch next. And if you want to understand why interruptions feel so painful, why that drive-by from your manager feels like somebody pulled the plug on your brain mid-thought, I made a video on something called the monotropic theory of autism or monotropism that explains exactly how autistic attention can work. It is the first video I ever made on this channel for a reason. That's well worth a watch. It's a bit cringy watching me, but you know, a younger Mike trying his best on YouTube for video one. I stand by it. Give it a watch, maybe. And if you want to understand why autistic people don't fit the IQ bell curve and why it's not about intelligence at all, I made a video on that too. This and the other videos mentioned are all linked in the description for you below. Oh, and I've posted a video on Patreon responding to Kaylin Partlow's 26% of autistic people are profoundly autistic. They're not. It's all explained in that video though, for those of you that support me on Patreon. Bye for now. See you all later. Bye.